This was my second attempt to reach the northernmost point of Europe, Nordkapp. Well, technically, it is not the northernmost point of continental Europe. Technically, it is the northernmost point in Europe that can be reached by public roads. Nordkapp translates as North Cape. It is not even on the European mainland. It is a cape on the island of Majeroya in northern Norway. This steep 307-meter-high cliff, jutting out into the Barents Sea, has come to be considered the northernmost point in Europe due to its accessibility and the infrastructure created for tourists. Due to the well-developed infrastructure, people try to reach Nordkapp using various means of transport. Just now, I met a group of Italians who were traveling north in vintage cars. It was clear that even though they were traveling slowly and their journey was taking longer than it would in modern cars, they were enjoying their choice. Official statistics show that more than 200,000 tourists visit here every year, including, as usual, many motorcyclists. I am sometimes asked what is so special about Nordkapp that so many motorcyclists want to go there. It's hard for me to answer for everyone. For me, such trips are part of getting to know myself. The conditions for riding on two wheels, especially solo, are particularly difficult here. You constantly have to battle the wind, rain, and often the cold. Therefore, for me, such trips are first and foremost about getting to know the places I travel to, and then also about getting to know myself. Plus, there is the pleasure of traveling. In this case, it is about getting to know the harsh nature even in summer. I first attempted to reach Nordkapp by motorcycle in early autumn 2020. However, due to the COVID restrictions in place at the time, I only made it to the Norwegian border. At that time, I was standing on the Finnish side of Norway border, 300 kilometers from my destination, and I promised myself that I would return and complete the journey. In the previous episode, I mentioned that I reached Norway on the evening of the third day of my trip. I had 1 day left to reach Nordkapp and 2 routes to choose from. A faster direct route or a longer route, symbolically continuing the journey from where it had ended 5 years ago. I chose the second option. So, in the morning, I didn't head straight to Nordkapp, but took the narrow Norwegian roads to the town of Karasjok, which I had seen from the Finnish side 5 years ago, promising myself that I would return someday. Only then I turned towards Nordkapp. Along the way, I was accompanied by reindeer and ever-changing scenery, each view more beautiful than the last. Although the evening weather forecast promised rain and wind, it changed slightly overnight, and the weather did not deteriorate as predicted. When I left, it was about 10 degrees Celsius, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, but after riding about 70 kilometers, the temperature dropped by half, the asphalt was already wet, and soon it started to rain. At one point I even thought that it was getting cold. Even 6 layers of clothing with 2 windproof and waterproof jackets didn't help. Moisture was already seeping through my clothes, and the motorcycle thermometer showed just 3 degrees Celsius, about 37.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Luckily, it only lasted about half an hour. The rain subsided, the temperature began to rise again, and 8 degrees Celsius, 46.4 degrees Fahrenheit, was ultimately quite pleasant. At that point, the road was winding through fjords. Cliffs began to rise into the sky, and streams and waterfalls cascaded from them. I drove and enjoyed the views, In Norway, the speeds on the roads are not high, but that doesn't mean you can relax, especially on two wheels. I stopped often to admire what I was seeing for a longer time. This trip was not a fast ride, it was a ride for enjoyment. The road began to cut through the mountains with tunnels, one of which went straight down. In fact, Nordkapp is on an island, and nowadays there is a 7-kilometer tunnel under the sea leading to it. Driving through it, I thought that such a tunnel could indeed make you claustrophobic. The road descends quite steeply for 3 kilometers, then goes straight for a kilometer, and then climbs again for 3 kilometers. Later on this trip, I drove through tunnels almost every day. When it rained, the tunnels provided some respite from the pervasive dampness. At the end of the trip, the tunnels even became colorful. But more about that lately in the next episodes. By the way, a subsea tunnel to Majeroya Island, where Nordkapp Cliff is, was built from 1993 to 1999. The North Cape Tunnel is part of the European Route E69 highway. It is almost 7 kilometers long and reaches a depth of 212 meters, 696 feet below sea level. For a time, it was one of the longest and deepest subsea tunnels in the world. I even saw information somewhere that fog or ice may occur inside the tunnel, even in summer. The closer I got to Nordkapp, the stronger the wind became. Eventually, all that remained around me was a lunar landscape without any vegetation, with patches of snow scattered everywhere. Here, the wind was so strong that it seemed insignificant. The good thing was that it was stable. So, even with such strong winds, it is easier to ride than with weaker winds, but with strong gusts. And here, not far from Nordkapp, something happened that could have seriously ruined my trip. Fortunately, everything ended happily. A young reindeer almost got caught under my wheels. I noticed the little one at the last moment and didn't even have time to brake. If it had continued running across the road toward its mother, things could have ended quite sadly. The situation was saved by the fact that at the last moment, the beautiful fawn turned around and ran away from the motorcycle. This incident reminded me that I can't relax. I stopped at a small campsite about 12 kilometers before the Nordkapp Cliff. I planned to ride to the monument marking the edge of the world at night, so I had a few hours to rest and admire the harsh northern views. Reindeer were grazing all around, a sharp and very strong wind was blowing, but it was good that it was not raining. My motives for reaching Nordkapp at night were very simple. I wanted to avoid the crowds. The traffic on the road to and from the monument is also light at night. Since I was already far beyond the Arctic Circle, I didn't worry about the darkness. The sun shines here all day long in the summer. To reach one of the main goals of my trip, the Nordkapp Cliff, I left the campsite after midnight. The wind was howling like crazy. The thermometer showed only 3 degrees Celsius, 37.4 degrees Fahrenheit. My hands were numb. but I was lucky because the midnight sun was breaking through the clouds. By the way, late at night, when I was returning to the campsite from Nordkapp, the motorcycle thermometer showed that the air temperature had already dropped to 2 degrees Celsius, 35.6 degrees Fahrenheit. The weather apps at that time wrote that the felt temperature was minus 3 degrees Celsius, 26.6 degrees Fahrenheit. If the world were flat, Nordkapp would be the end of the world where you could sit on a rock and look out at the ocean while swinging your legs. Finally, after 4 days of riding, I did what I couldn't do in 2020 due to COVID restrictions on crossing borders when I had to turn around just 300 kilometers from my destination. I was happy. From home to Nordkapp, I rode 2,384 kilometers on the same public roads through rain, wind and cold. Although there was some good weather, I can't say. While I was still in Nordkapp, I thought that I had visited the southernmost and westernmost points of the continent on 2 wheels in Europe before. I did this a year ago while riding a motorcycle around Portugal, and now, the northernmost point of Europe. Now, the slow journey south will begin, exploring Norway at a leisurely pace. Nordkapp was just one of several destinations on my trip to Norway. Another place I wanted to visit was the Lofoten archipelago, so I headed there from Nordkapp. On the way, I had planned to take part in a whale watching safari in the open ocean, so I chose not to take the fastest land route, but to use the ferry and transfer from Senja Island to Andoya Island, where whale safaris are organized. I will say in advance that the whale safari did not work out for me. It was cancelled a few hours before setting sail in the evening. The reason, as they said, was for safety reasons due to strong winds and raging waves in the ocean, but that will be later. When leaving Nordkapp, I took more care of my clothing layers. The thermometer showed plus 5 degrees Celsius, 41 degrees Fahrenheit. Several layers of warm, windproof and rainproof clothing and hot coffee, a big thanks to my excellent travel espresso machine, were just what I needed at the time. As the road descended, the air warmed and the thermometer showed plus 9 to plus 13, 48.2 to 55.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Despite the cold weather and strong winds, people travel here by various means of transport. Cars, motorcycles, local companies organize quad bike tours. Here in the north, you can also meet many people cycling. Some rented bicycles when they arrived here. Others traveled hundreds and sometimes thousands of kilometers from their homes. Some cyclists are attracted to Nordkapp no less than motorcyclists. Looking at the faces of some, they do not seem very happy to be riding up the mountains. However, others roll down the hills relaxed. It is especially strange to see cyclists in tunnels, but they also ride here. It's quite cold in some of the tunnels. The temperature here doesn't get higher than plus 7 or 8 degrees Celsius, about 45 Fahrenheit. Meanwhile, the mountains were still covered in snow when I was traveling, especially higher up. You ride and there are snowfields all around. The peaks above were completely white. In case you forgot, I'll remind you, it was almost midsummer when I traveled here, the end of June. As you know, Norway is home to both wild and domestic reindeer. Domestic reindeer are managed by local people and they are a key part of the local culture. Norway has a much larger population of domestic reindeer than wild reindeer. They said that there are approximately 25,000 wild reindeer in Norway. Meanwhile, domestic reindeer could be around 250,000 to 1.2 million, with the majority in the Finnmark region. This is the northernmost region of Norway, which also includes Nordkapp. Reindeer are often not afraid of cars and do not watch out for them before crossing roads. Reindeer collisions with vehicles are a major problem in Norway, especially in the northern regions where reindeer are found. Be careful if you ever travel here. About 3.5 hours from Nordkapp is the small town of Alta. It is included in the list of the northernmost cities in the world, but that is not what interested me. In Alta, I was most interested in seeing the Alta Museum, the World Heritage Center for Rock Art. The Alta Rock Art is one of 8 sites in Norway, included in the UNESCO World Heritage List. The Alta World Heritage consists of rock carvings and drawings, the oldest of which are more than 7,000 years old. The museum, which is open 360 days a year, is the only museum on the Norwegian mainland to have won the European Museum of the Year award. The Alta rock art exhibited under the open sky is truly impressive. Here we will see animals or people who are thousands of years old, engaged in various activities. Here we will see not even people and animals, but boats, jewelry, geometric patterns, and many other things that surrounded people at that time. On the way to Senja Island, my road went up and down. There was snow in the mountains, and as the road went down, everything around was green. When entering the tunnels, one landscape pleased the eye, and when leaving them, a completely different one. The temperature jumped depending on the altitude at which the road wound, and I thought about the fact that I have a big problem here in Norway. It is so beautiful here that I want to stop, admire, and take pictures at every corner. I had to concentrate very hard not to do that. I still had a long road ahead of me across the country, so I could not stay in one place for long. On the way to Senja, I met a local biker at a gas station who warned me not to exceed the speed limit. The police measured the speed on the way. I had already seen one officer who talked to a stopped motorcyclist. Speeding fines in Norway are very high. Believe me, no one is happy to receive such fines. I thanked the good biker I met for the warning. In general, riding a motorcycle in Norway is quite safe. The biggest danger for a motorcyclist here, in my opinion, is to make a fatal mistake himself while staring at the breathtaking views around. It took me 2 days to ride from Nordkapp to Senja Island, where I hoped to catch a ferry to Andinis, a town on Andoya Island, from which my path would lead me to the Lofoten archipelago. During this time, I covered 670 kilometers. It was raining a little and the wind was blowing quite strongly, but I was already used to the rain, the wind, and the soaring temperatures. It seemed that it could not be otherwise. When I passed Senja Island, the asphalt was steaming from the rain, the road rose up, and the clouds covering the mountains seemed to be descending. It seemed that you could raise your hand and grab a cloud. But soon the wind blew everything away, and the views around were once again pleasing to the eyes. I was greeted by a long line of cars, mostly camper vans, at the ferry. It can take up to 2 days for the last tourists here to get on the ferry. When I was researching this route online, I read many reviews from people who had traveled there, saying that during the tourist season, the line can be very long. The ferry between Senja and Andoya only runs a few times a day. It is not very big, and only a very limited number of cars can fit on it. The tourist season had already begun, so those waiting in line have to be morally prepared for this. The motorcycles is another story. In Norway, motorcycles are usually allowed on ferries first, so it is quite normal to go around the line of waiting camper vans and stand in front of them. By the way, a few months later, in the fall, I found information online that a ferry trying to dock at this pier on the island of Senja had crashed into it due to strong winds and severely damaged it. Ferry traffic between the islands of Senja and Andoya was completely stopped until the damaged pier was repaired. The trip from Senja to Andenes takes a little over 2 hours. At first, the ferry sails along the fjord, but most of the journey continues on the open sea. At the ferry, I met 3 Polish motorcyclists who had come from Krakow, a city in southern Poland, to Nordkapp, and now, like me, are exploring Norway. At first, we struggled to tie our motorcycles to the ferry's hooks so that the waves wouldn't tip them over. It's funny, but we still tied them poorly. The ferry crew fixed everything before sailing, and we only noticed it when we went ashore. Those 2 hours on the gently rolling sea didn't last long, as we discussed motorcycle matters, adventures, and routes. The Poles had traveled around Scotland a year ago. They advised me to plan a motorcycle trip there right now, although they suggested that I also think about Ireland. To be honest, I've been thinking about Scotland for a long time, so maybe it's time to plan such a trip more seriously. We parted ways with the Polish motorcyclists like old friends. I even received an invitation to visit if I was passing through Krakow. Who knows, Lithuania and Poland are neighboring countries, and Krakow is a really beautiful city. If you haven't been there, you should visit. I definitely recommend it. When I left the ferry at Andoya Island, I was still hoping to go for a whale watching the next morning. But, as I mentioned, the whale safari was cancelled, leaving me with more time to explore Norway on a motorbike. The Lofoten archipelago was just around the corner, so I went to bed that night already planning my next day route.